All right, hello, welcome back to the Messengers of Hermes show. I'm back with Logan,
Hello.
and we're going to be talking about episode 5, our thoughts and things we liked, things we didn't like, things that were questionable. But again, like we start out in all of these episodes, Logan, I want to ask you, what were your overall thoughts for the episode?
Well, like always, it had good stuff and it had bad stuff. So let's get into it.
Yeah, that's where I am right now. Like, there's things where I'm like, man, that was really well done. And there's things that I'm like, yeah, I don't know if that was the right choice, but I guess we'll wait till it goes down further into the season, because like certain things I've thought were questionable in the past with episodes, and as the series is going on, I've been like, okay, I understand it more. I don't question it as much. But that's just, maybe it'll be better, maybe it'll be worse as we go forward. Hopefully better. But let's get into the episode. So, the opening shot basically follows directly after the end of episode 4, and we see basically a really awesome visual of the arch. Again, me and Logan both live near the arch, so like it's not this like grand thing to see the arch. We've seen the arch a lot. But it was still a nice, like, it was filmed really well. But
it's nice for it to be acknowledged. The last movie I could truly think of that really showed St. Louis was the Lampoon's National Vacation, and that was not a good way of representing it. So
no, it wasn't. But yeah, so we get to this cut of Annabeth and Grover, because again, they don't know what happened to Percy. So they're basically around the water, they're around where the police are and the ambulances and the news and all that. And they're pretty much like, yeah, did Percy just die, or what happened here? And Logan, I want to know your opinion here, because they do the scene. I talked about a scene in episode 1 that they left out from the book, which was the Fates. And so they implemented it here. What were your thoughts on that?
It was nice to actually see him. I did recently reread the books. Now I semi remember some of the stuff, but it was nice to finally see him, because, like you said, it was like one of the early, like, I think first or second chapter that they're actually
it's literally on the bus
the
ride back from like the whole museum fiasco.
Yes, yeah. So to finally see him was nice. I mean, other than that, there's not too much to them, because I mean, they're just the Fates. What little you know is what little they have about them. But I will say I'm a little questionable about Annabeth and Grover, wondering if Percy's still alive. I get that's how they were in the book, and maybe it makes sense. But if you were to see that giant pillar of water come out of the Mississippi River, maybe humans wouldn't see it, or just normal humans, but the demigod kids, like, I feel like they would have seen it.
Well, to play devil's advocate, they were in the arch, so who knows if they were actually like at like a window, or they would have been in a spot to actually see what happened. Like, for all we know, they could have maybe just heard an explosion. That's me playing devil's advocate. But that's a valid point. So the thing I was really like, that I thought about with the Fates, was they introduced them here instead of the beginning. Like, I thought it was just because, okay, we're going to speed by it, we didn't need them. I do find it weird. Like, it connects to this episode really well, based upon, what's going to happen at the end. There's a really big theme about fate in this episode and prophecy. And so it fits into that really well. I just don't know if I would have sacrificed putting it here instead of the beginning, because the beginning, it's more to foreshadow things to come. Specifically, you even look at how Percy thinks his mom is dead, and that's actually a really interesting plot point that's different from the book than the show that I didn't remember, is that Percy doesn't like realize that his mom could possibly be alive until like this actual like chapter. Ares is the one that tells him that.
Yeah, for this whole time he thought she was gone forever, just dead. Not what he ends up finding out here in episode 5.
So again, I don't mind that they moved the Fates to this episode, because they executed it well. It connects into the episode really well. I just don't know if I personally would have moved it from episode 1, because I think it means more to Percy in that moment. But again, just it works, so we'll just move on.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I like it both ways, so I can complain nor compliment. So
yeah, like, don't get me wrong, I like the way they did it in the show. I just think it's slightly better in the book. But that's kind of how I feel about a lot of things. But again, it's a TV show. You're coming off the movies. You don't probably have the biggest budget, so you got to make some compromises here and there, and you're trying to get to certain plot points.
Yep.
But they leave basically this whole thing going on with all these news people, the police that are looking for them now. And I do think it's interesting that they almost instantly find Percy, which is like, it's a convenience, but it's like, I'm not going to like harp on it too much because, again, this is a world with Greek mythology and magic. So, fair enough,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yep.
But this is an interesting moment because this is Annabeth's and Percy's first hug, which is a nice, cute moment because it's like Percy basically sacrificed himself for Annabeth. So it's a nice moment, coming full circle with that. But we also get the idea that Percy, when talking to the water spirit or whatever it is, whatever we came up to with what it was in the last episode, it basically tells him that they need to go to Santa Monica because Poseidon will help them there and whatever. So that brings up basically the whole point of this episode. How do we get there? These are 3 kids. They can't drive. They are now being hunted by the police. They have no food, no money. How do they get there? And, well, they just start walking, which is interesting, to say the least.
Best way to do it, honestly.
Yeah, there wasn't really like an alternative because of the way they set the episode up, where it's like the police are looking for them, and they're like, I would say, grounding it more. Like, that's the one thing I think in the book that is a bit missing, is like when all of these things are kind of getting blamed on Percy, it kind of feels like the police don't really care. Like, it's one of those things that's mentioned, but there's no like repercussions of that. Because like in the book, it's like, yeah, this happens. They think Percy did it more or less, but it doesn't matter because he can still get on public transport easily, and that's what ends up happening.
Yep.
So I like the change here of having them be even a little bit more desperate in this, that they're literally walking on the side of the road. So all of that's pretty good. I do enjoy that. And so we kind of start to get them talking about the Master Bolt, because the Master Bolt and who stole it and all that is going to be a massive plot point for this episode specifically, and of this whole first season. But, this is, I guess, a big talking point, because I honestly think, Logan, I don't know if you want to do this or not, but I think we should, when we get to Percy and Annabeth's plot and then Grover and Ares' plot, that we should just take them one at a time, because I think it's easier to do it that way.
Yeah, that's definitely the better way to do it.
So we'll talk more about this Master Bolt stuff, but for now, they really just talk about, they don't even know who stole it. Like, it's still a mystery to them. But the one thing that I think is interesting is we continue to kind of see that, and it's even more apparent in this episode, this flip of how Annabeth and Percy view the gods. Like, Percy is someone that's like, wow, my dad saved me. He's never done anything for me in my entire life. And he kind of thinks now a little bit more favorably of like Poseidon, for instance, whereas Annabeth, and we talked a lot about this in the last episode that we did, Annabeth is much more like, okay, Athena almost got us killed, almost got Percy killed. Like, now I should have some reflection time of that. And that's just some great writing. I enjoyed that part of the writing, because that's not only that, is like Percy and Annabeth, they flip on their ideologies, the way they believe things should go, quite a lot. The other one's going to be like prophecy, where Percy starts off, because they have this conversation about the fates and how one of them is going to die, right? That's what Annabeth saw. And Percy's like, nah, right? He basically takes the opposite approach of Anakin in Star Wars. He's like, I can make my own choices, right? This prophecy is not going to happen, and, if I just do whatever I'm going to do. And Annabeth is kind of like the opposite. She's like, no, this is the fates. Like, somebody's going to die. So it's interesting because that's going to kind of flip on its head, like, by the end part of the episode. And I enjoyed that as well. There's also, okay, so Logan, this is by far one of my favorite comedy moments of the entire show so far. But the line where Annabeth's like, one of us is going to die, and Percy goes, we're all gonna die. Like,
we all die eventually.
Like,
that was pretty
perfect response. Okay, I even like, this is the only moment where in the show where I've like actually like chuckled. Like, there's been other moments where I thought were funny, but it wasn't where I was like, okay, that was a good one. But this one was so good. I really wrote in my notes, I'm like, whoever wrote that line, you should get a raise. Perfect.
It was
perfect Marvel comedy. I will say, the Marvel comedy in this show has been pretty good. Okay. Whoever's doing the Marvel comedy for this show, they should get raised up to Marvel. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, maybe some fixing there, but yeah. Anyways.
They might need more than just fixing the comedy. Maybe need less comedy in Marvel, but there's so many issues. But that's a whole nother thing. At least Disney seems like they're on the right path with the Percy Jackson
Yes.
series. I mean, that's what we can say. But again, I did note that I like Percy, how he wants to take things in his own hands. He's not going to let prophecy, jerk him around or whatever. But at this point, we see Ares, and he stops next to them while they're talking. So let's stop here for a second. Logan, what were your thoughts on, I think for the episode as a whole, the depiction of Ares?
I think they did a pretty good job. He's no one famous, which I'm a little confused on with the gods because we saw Hermes earlier, and of course, he was that's a Lin Manuel, and he's pretty famous. And then we get Ares, and I don't know, maybe I've just never seen him before, but I don't know. He just seems like a nobody, and then all of a sudden now he's supposed to play a big role god, which I'm not complaining, but I'm just not sure about. But to the character itself, I did like how they made him look. It's pretty book accurate. I will say I wish he had kept his sunglasses on the whole time.
Yeah.
Didn't have your normal eyes, but I get budget cuts and everything. So would have been cool to see the little nuclear eyes, but I'll take what we can get.
Yeah, that's one thing where I think of all of the episodes, you could tell the budget constraints in this one. Like, it is quite different in grand scale of what Ares looks like, and like his bike, for instance, like his bike is described as like a mini elephant. So but yeah, so like Ares in the book has like, isn't it just like red, like glowing eyes or something in his sockets? It's not like normal eyes.
The way he describes it varied. It was like glowing red, and then he said other times, like if you were to get him angry, it's almost like nukes went off in his eyes. So I was like, I probably looks and sounds disturbing, but I was just imagining mushroom clouds in his like for his eyebrows.
Yeah, and I think outside of just the stuff, because that stuff's hard to do, given like we can tell obviously because the show's only 8 episodes. CGI restraints, I'm not docking them for that. I'm just kind of pointing out the differences. But I will say that the actor that did Ares, I think he did a very good job. Like he kind of is what I feel like Ares would be. He can be very menacing, very scary, or kind of antagonizing force, but also at other times, like he can be kind of calm and cool and collected as well. So
yeah, if he's your buddy, he's going to be nice to you. But if you're on the other side of that front line, that's a problem.
He kind of gives you like that, like, doesn't care about anything, like
yes, yeah,
uncle vibe is how I view him. But yeah,
it's a good way. Yeah,
I think the actor did a very good job. And again, I think they've done a continuously good job of casting so far. I think they've like kind of been well for the most part. Still, this episode, we're going to talk about it when we get to one of the plot lines, but there is something that I don't know how I feel about. But let's kind of continue. So at this point, Ares pulls up next to him, asks for them for help, and they're like, no, even though, again, they're hitchhiking along the road and need to get to the entire western side of the country, and they're in the direct middle at the moment. And Ares, like, basically kind of reveals himself and says, yeah, you guys need help. We're going to meet at the diner. And what I love here is he just leaves them to walk. The most Ares thing ever. It's just like, okay, well, we're going to meet you at this diner, and I'm out.
Yep, see ya.
But they get to the diner and they begin talking with Ares, and they show a video of Gabe saying that like Percy's a monster and stuff, which again, good Marvel comedy. I appreciate it.
Yep. That's also how the book kind of was. It just he didn't have his psychologist or grievance counselor, lady friend, whatever you want to call her.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah.
It was still pretty good, though. I like the scene.
So one thing I do want to point out is that I think that this whole sequence with Ares throughout the episode didn't really capture to me is that, and again, it's much harder to do because you're not inside a character's mind. You're not knowing what they're thinking. But for the most part, like that essence of like when you're around Ares, you instantly have hate. You want to fight. That didn't really like make any type of factor here. Like Grover, for instance, is someone that is just constantly like cool, calm, and collected. Annabeth, it's hard to tell the difference because she's pretty much always angry, unless it's Percy and Grover. Doesn't matter who she's talking to. She'll just say her mind. And then Percy, it's weird because in like the first meeting, he's very, he seems like all right, the second meeting he's a little bit more pissed off. But
Yeah,
I don't know.
it
It's one
wasn't.
thing where it's like in the book, it's like Percy is constantly trying to fight off punching this dude in the mouth, which is just something that isn't really translated here, but it is something very difficult to do because it is in
Yeah.
Percy's head.
I say it's very hard to get that inner monologue without having to ruin the show and
Yeah.
just have him all of a sudden talk. So
Yep. Agreed.
They they definitely could have done more though,
Yeah.
constant, like, I I don't know, maybe I'm asking for too much, but maybe, like, they just frowned more than normal. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
That I think it's just the direction of the scene. Like I just
Mhm.
think they could have done a little bit more with this scene with Ares specifically with all three of them, but who knows. But I will say I like this entire dialogue and or speech about that Ares says, explaining the backstory of the Greek gods and how war is inevitable, right? The gods want power. They may not say they like war, but war brings them a lot of power and things like that. And specifically pointing out that Zeus seems okay with that violence. It is just a natural occurrence for the Greeks. That makes sense. Like, think about just human history in general. Human history is just, it seems like for a while anyway, it was just a constant cycle of violence or war because
Yeah.
you want this territory or this grievance against this place or whatever. So I really like that. It kind of reflects the way humans have been, and maybe you can put that on in this world the gods because the gods themselves propagate those things, and it really paints, I think, the gods in this light that again showing a lot of those negative qualities that will be very vital to this series going forward. And it's something that I will say that I think the show is doing better than the books did. The books, they still like have, okay, why are the gods maybe not so good? I think it's more in the later books. Like in the first book, it's not nearly as talked about as it is in the show. So that's one thing I think they're doing really good. I don't know if you agree with that, Logan, but like, yeah,
I do, yeah, I agree there.
I think they're doing a very good job of that personally. But at this, Percy's kind of like done with all this talking, and he gets to the point asking how Ares can help them. And all Ares says is that he wants his shield back, and that he will help them get to the West Coast. But at this, Annabeth questions it. Again, this makes a lot of sense for her character. This is very suspicious. Like, this dude's just like, oh yeah, just go get my shield. That's it. He doesn't give any other context. Just go get my shield. Go get my shield. Now, the thing I don't like about this sequence is Ares basically says nothing and says, go find it. Like, it's like, okay, I mean, I get why, because he's a god and he's very arrogant and stuff, but the book version of this is so much better because Ares is like, yeah, I went there with Aphrodite and, I got spooked. Or, well, Percy and Annabeth Grover get it out of him that he got spooked, but that he left behind his shield, more or less. And so it's not like Ares is just like, yeah, I'm not going to tell you anything at all. I don't know, Logan, like, which version do you like better?
I honestly don't know. It was in the book, it's nice to get that little conversation just to kind of like, add to the story about what's going to happen in a couple minutes in the show. But at the same time, being a god, he doesn't want to tell these mere mortals much about his story. It's just like, just do as I say, do my bidding. You are my cousins, I think he says.
Yes.
You're my cousins that can die, so go get it.
So, okay, my rationale as to why I think it's somewhat important for Ares to not look suspicious is spoilers, so I'm not going to say it. But I just think, I think for book readers, they will understand a lot of my rationale a little bit more than maybe someone that just watches the show. But yeah, I do think it's interesting. It's not that big of a point because Percy and Annabeth basically figure this out and talk about it later on as soon as they get to the amusement park anyway. So it's not that big of a deal, but it's something I just kind of picked on. So at this point, Ares decides, okay, one of you has to stay behind so you guys don't run off, which is interesting given that Ares can easily track them down. So this, in my opinion, easily was a plot contrivance to get Grover and Ares alone, or Ares, and to get Percy and Annabeth alone. So yeah, it is what it is. I do like that Grover is someone that is like, okay, yeah, I'll stay behind, right? I like that, right? Him standing up for that and all that. But at the same time, what does this do again? the thing that I've thought about Grover's character the most for these first 4 episodes is Grover is basically a side companion that almost does nothing outside of just kind of bringing Percy and Annabeth together. Like that's really all he does. He doesn't do anything. Like if they get into a fight, he's not doing much. He's flying away and then coming back randomly to knock someone over.
Yep.
And so this episode once again puts Grover on the sideline, which I just think is a bad decision. Because in the book, Logan, I don't know if you remember this, but in like their actual chapter when they go to the amusement park to get back Ares' shield, Grover saves their lives.
Oh yeah, no, it was more or less all Grover.
Like Grover does a lot, like Percy does a lot as well. Annabeth kind of freezes up because of another thing that's not in the show, which a little bit of a missed opportunity given her fear of spiders and yeah, but whatever. Yeah. It's kind of an important plot point, not exactly in this series, but another series. But you know, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. It's not that big of a deal. But I just think taking Grover out of this, it continues to just, they're putting a lot of his character development, a lot of things that I think are important for his character to the sideline. And it's not like I don't like Grover, but he just isn't really the Grover of the book. Like, even in the way, so at this point, right, our groups separate. Let's focus on Grover and Ares first, because I think they're the more minor of the 2 plots at this point.
Yep.
And I don't know about you, Logan, but the way I read Grover in the first book is he's someone that doesn't have the most amount of confidence, right? He's someone that is very unsure of himself. He's now failed, again, twice to get his searcher's license. He's someone that if you put him one-on-one with Ares, I don't think would be as calm and collected. And you have the fact that Ares has an aura around him that makes you very antagonized. So this whole sequence to me just didn't ring right. Like, this was definitely the B plot. Like, when this came on, I was like, oh, okay, I'm not as interested anymore.
Yeah. I definitely agree. It really threw me off when they started talking about war, and Grover was like, oh yeah, I love it. I was like, hang on, this isn't Grover.
Yeah.
I get where the producers were coming from for this new version of him with Ares, but it still feels off to me about it.
It just doesn't feel like the character of Grover. And I get why they do all these things, because Grover's trying to butter Ares up because he wants him to spill some sort of information. And so he's trying to gain that. And so, again, there's about 2 scenes worth of stuff between Grover and Ares, and most of it is on Percy and Annabeth. But the first part of it is just blatantly Grover trying to get on Ares' side and just buttering up, trying to get Ares to like him more. We cut back on the second one. The second one is just basically Grover finally has got him comfortable enough, and he's like, oh, I wonder who stole this bolt. And he's like, you caught this person with the bolt or something like that. And then you have to see Ares with like a face of like kind of shock or something like that. And then it's kind of a fade, and then it goes back to the Percy Annabeth plot. And I'm just sitting here like, that is a very interesting conclusion to come to based off of the information that Grover would know.
It definitely was not what I was expecting, like a lot of the stuff with Grover, but I can't say I was the biggest fan of it. And I will say I was kind of disappointed they missed a very big, or at least what I think is a big deal in the books. When they were talking about who took the Master Bolt, he brings up that Ares or Hades could have stole it. Or I think he just said Hades, I can't remember already. But that is a key thing in the books, that a god cannot steal another god's I forget what they call them. They're like
their heirloom or their
like a Zeus's lightning bolt, Poseidon's trident. Another god couldn't come and steal it, but they make it seem like a god could now, and I just don't know how I feel about that as a very key thing in the books.
And so, and for me personally, I'm not going to say it's like a bad thing already, because I don't know where they're going with it. I mean, I do have an idea of where they're going with it, but if it's the way I think they're doing it, I don't think they're handling the situation right. But again, that's something for future episodes we're going to talk about. For now, this feels like it's a setup for a plot going forward in the back half of the season. And so I just don't think it was worth separating Grover from the main two just for this. I could change my opinion on that as the series goes on, but I just think Grover, there was much more that we could have explored with his character, but if he was with Annabeth and Percy. But, you know, it is what it is. So let's shift over to by far the better part of this episode, and that's Annabeth and Percy. And right away, I want to note this. They once again did such a fantastic job of writing horror. Like, the writers of this show, or not even the writers, but the music, the visuals, the acting is all really good for like a horror movie, because it's like you pan in and it's this amusement park that looks run down. It looks like there's nobody here. It's abandoned, but it looks like really creepy. And they start off with like this creepy music as you go into it. I just, again, we talked about it with Medusa episode. We talked about it in the last episode. Really good stuff there. I really enjoy the way they do that stuff. And they even like switch up the tone with this amusement park, which I really enjoy. But our crew realized that Hephaestus, I hope that's how you say his name. Pronunciation is not my strong suit.
Hephaestus?
Hephaestus, okay. But basically that this was built by him. But I love Percy's acting and Annabeth going all nerdy, trying to figure out how like this contraption works when they're trying to enter. It's just both of their personalities like really well in a nutshell. So that part of it, like their dynamic, they got really well done there. Also, I will say one thing I noted in this episode. I know other people have talked about it in reviews for this show, but the cuts to black just gotta stop. Like, it was way more noticeable for me in this episode. Maybe it's because I wasn't looking for it, but I was more made aware of it, I guess. And I just noticed it so much in this episode, where every time that it would go from Percy and Annabeth to Grover and Ares, it would be a cut to black. And I'm just like, why? Stop cutting to black.
Right.
Maybe that's just me being a nitpicker, but I hated it. But yeah. So we then get, after they get through and they're into the amusement park, we see the two discussing what really happened with Ares and Hephaestus. And again, I love this because it's building up what this amusement park was really for and what it's doing. But we learn that again that they hate each other and that Ares and Aphrodite got caught here and had to leave early. Again, in the book we already know that going into this, but in the show they have to introduce that now. And all that kind of ties in really nicely because Ares and Aphrodite were on a little date and Hephaestus caught them. So, you know, you hate to see that.
Yep.
But they end up going into the thrill of love and the dialogue, just the awkward dialogue of two young kids that like, it seems like already have some sort of like spark or like some growing relationship, and how they're both just super awkward about it is great.
It was pretty good.
It reminds you of your younger self, right, Logan?
Whoa. I don't know about me.
Hey, man, I'm just saying, out of the two of us, you were the one with a girlfriend at that age.
Fair enough.
Shout out to that person. We won't name their name, but shout out to you.
No, we will not.
But I also like love, so they're going in this ride, and it's still playing on this very ominous, very like horror aspect of it. And when they get to a certain part, it just starts going into a song, and I'm just like, this is wonderful. I don't know who did this, but this is a great job. Just fantastic.
Yes, it was very good.
Where am I on my notes? All right, so I think the song is called "What Is Love." I'm not 100% sure on that.
That's it.
I was assuming that was what the title was. Hey, I don't love the old music, but I appreciate it. Also, I want to know, like, the visuals here, like telling the story of Hephaestus, are fantastic. Okay, just like watching this little show on like I don't even know what you want to call it, like inside the ride, I guess.
Yeah,
it's just really good because it also shows you another part of this that like we've been talking about with this show is like how the gods treat each other. That's something Ares kind of introduces into the story, and just seeing Hephaestus's story, it's quite messed up. Like, it's really messed up. Yeah. I like the way that they paint that, again, showing the gods in this not great light. But I also love the way that they connect that to Percy and his mom, right? Percy, telling him some of these stories and telling him, how awful the gods could be, not only to like each other, but to, for instance, like how we talked about with Medusa. All of that's kind of been connecting really well. And I enjoyed the way they tied that in, giving some other like lesson that Percy learned from his mom and that building connection, and how Percy is almost like, I guess, what would I say? Like he feels underprepared for this world. And how Annabeth is that person that's like, well, maybe it's a good thing, right? Because being in this world isn't, great. Like, just think about all the Greek mythology stuff. A lot of it doesn't end well, and there's a lot of backstabbing. There's a lot of war. It's great because Percy isn't that. Whereas Annabeth is kind of the other flip side of that, where she's been blindly following her mother, and now she's kind of starting to think about that a little bit more critically. And she's someone that's grown up in this world for a long time. She has way more experience than Percy does. It's nice to see the two kind of think about thoughts like that, but it's really awesome. So I also wanted to point out the camera work was really good when they're going down this ride. Really good. We see some camera angles from like behind them basically as they're going down, which was really awesome to see. But they eventually get to where the shield is. It's on top of this statue, and Annabeth notes it's a machine. So at this point, I want to stop, and Logan, I want to ask you, what do you think of the way they changed this whole, I guess, scene? Like this entire really like amusement park, the way things go down compared to the book.
I liked parts of it more than the book. I wish they had the very end, not the very end, but we'll talk about it when it comes. But there was a part where I just kind of wished that they had made another version of it, because the book version was okay, but you needed Grover for it to happen.
Yeah,
But I also
that's the
wasn't the
problem.
biggest. Yeah, I wasn't the biggest fan on the I mean, we're already talking about it, I guess, the whole chair
Yeah.
part. I was not a big fan of that. I was like, okay, yeah, that's another Percy being the Percy we know and love, but we could have done something else with that.
So, yeah, we get to the statue, and for people that aren't book readers, what more or less happens is this is done like very differently. In the book, it's like the shield is very visible. It's in the boat, right? All they've got to do is they go down in this boat and they can pick up the shield. But once they pick up the shield, it's basically a trap, right? You have this closing net on them. It's basically supposed to kind of repeat history, how Ares and Aphrodite, that was the story, right? That they get captured in a net together.
Yeah,
and it's embarrassed them.
Yeah, they're in bed, and then the net traps them. Just kind of like a net, but in like a gladiator arena. They get stuck under it, and then Hephaestus is like, "Hey, everybody else, come make fun of my wife screwing the god of war."
Yeah. So it's basically supposed to be like that, but because again, it's not Ares and Aphrodite in this boat, it's Percy and Annabeth. In the book, they're basically slowly getting closed in until Percy does his water powers and he gets them out of it, but then they get to a point where like it's basically a blocked off exit and they have to do this really cool parkour move, and then Grover, using the little fly shoes, saves them. Like he basically makes it to where it won't fall and instantly die, more or less. And so it's about teamwork, right? Because all of them kind of have their own roles. Like Annabeth recognizes it's the trap. She doesn't do much after that, but
well, she helps with the jump, because if they jump,
that's true. Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's true.
It was nice to see all three have an important role in saving themselves instead of just being one or two people.
Yeah, I think that's my biggest like problem is we have really yet to like see that. Like the Medusa stuff you could maybe think about, but Grover's just comes off as clumsy and just And so the problem is when you try to do that now and you put it on the show. For one, that's a lot of CGI to do. That's a lot of set work you need to do. It's just a lot of work to pull off that kind of a scene. It's a lot of, you're gonna have stunt doubles, right, for how that was gonna happen. So I can understand why they changed it. It's a big budget like scene.
Oh yeah, it would have been big money.
And the other problem is, again, Grover's not here, so you'd still have to rework how the scene actually happens in general. And so the way they did it makes sense from a point of like it's just easier to do. It doesn't require as much money to do. And so I definitely see why they did it. And if it's just going to be Percy and Annabeth here, I don't mind it, but I think it should have tied in, I guess, a little bit more with like Ares and Aphrodite and the lore there. And like, I just think there could have been a little bit more tie-in. But because what we get here is not bad. I don't think this is bad by any means. I think the acting, this is by far, I think, the actress who plays Annabeth, her best acting that she's done, the best she's been given, right? And so before we get ahead of ourselves, they basically pull up to this chair and this, machine. They realize, okay, it's this, they're what am I looking for? The shield is on the top. One of them is going to have to sit in it, and they're not going to be able to get out, is more or less the conclusion they come to. And this also ties into lore. Is it like Hera? Is that the person that eventually was in like a chair like this and couldn't get out?
Yes, yeah.
That's the lore.
Hera was trapped in the chair. Yep.
So
Hephaestus wasn't a big fan of her because she disowned him as a child and threw him down Mount Olympus. So he hated her forever.
Yep. So I mean, part of it is kind of like Hephaestus's. It's again that more revenge and warring amongst the gods. There's part of that built into it, but it just doesn't really connect with, like, in my opinion, like Ares and Aphrodite necessarily. So that part of it I didn't really love. Now, the things I do like about the way that they executed this is it ties in really well with the Fates. It ties well into both of their personalities. It ties into, this is, honestly, you could look at this chair as being something that's going to connect the two much quicker, given that we only have 8 episodes, because it puts them in a very high stakes situation where one of them believes they're going to die, similar to last episode. So you just kind of have a reinforcing of that, and basically the same thing happens. It's Percy basically going to be the hero. He's going to give his life so that the quest can continue. All that. And so I thought it worked for me, given what they executed in this episode specifically. I just think I would have set up the episode differently. But again, what we got, I don't mind this at all. I think this was pretty solid for what we got. Logan, did you want to comment on anything you maybe didn't like or did like?
Like I said, I mean, I get it was a whole Hephaestus repeat in history with the chair, and then it's supposedly to be Aphrodite and Ares, but I still would have wished they did it a little different. How, I'm not sure, but it just wasn't the scene for me.
So I guess my other question would be, given that this was a trap for Aphrodite and Ares, what was the trap originally? Because you have to think, like, the shield, how does he get a, like, I'm talking about show canon, not like the books. Like, how does Ares lose his shield to begin with?
In the show?
Yeah, in the show.
I don't think he ever really specified. They Percy and Annabeth talk about it when they're on their way through the amusement park, and they more or less say, this is Hephaestus, is a amusement park, his little Tinkerland. And then they kind of, Annabeth starts putting, or was it Percy? One of them starts putting it together. They're like, oh, wait a minute. Ares has a fling with Aphrodite, who is Hephaestus's wife, more or less. So I think that's how they tell us about it. And they were like, well, they must have been in here doing the naughty, and something spooked them. And so then once they get on that one ride, they're like, this must be what scared him. And then they figure out how once they get to the room.
I guess, but when you think about the room and the way it's crafted as the trap, it doesn't work unless the shield's already there. So that's my thing that I'm like a little confused on, that logically I'm assuming there has to be something else like off screen that we just don't know about that must have scared them or something like that. But again, that's why I think that's something else I'm just going to tie into why I think Ares should have like explained a little bit more, like why he lost his shield. Because then you don't have to explore it. Now I'm going to like kind of question it a little bit, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. But still, they basically, again, Percy ends up sitting on this chair. It's a really emotional scene. I think if you have more than 2 brain cells, Percy's not going to die here. So on some level, it works because it's emotional for like Annabeth, for instance. She doesn't know that, but us, the audience, it's not nearly as emotional because I feel like he's not going to die here.
I mean, the show's named after him,
Yeah,
so
you're not
yeah.
gonna kill him in episode 5. If you're gonna kill him, it'd be like episode 8. But
Yep, yep. Now, it would have been funny, not that I wanted them to do this, if they left him there, and then it was just Grover and Annabeth for
that
the
would
rest
be
of the
funny. That'd be a big
series.
plot twist. Dude, you know how many people would riot? It's just like,
Oh, that
oh, the
yeah.
show would be burned down. People would be like, oh, the movie's so much better. It'd be like the prequels all over again at Star Wars. It'd be like, oh,
Yep.
prequels weren't so bad, dude. They were fine. Have you seen
Yep.
them sequels? They fucking suck.
Ooh, that's something else there.
But yeah. So we see again, Annabeth is trying to defeat fate, right? Whereas Percy has kind of accepted his fate, that he has to die so that the quest may go on. Annabeth is not willing to accept that. So again, I like that change in the way they think about things, and that's normal character development given how circumstances change. Really enjoyed that part of it. And at this, we see Festus. That was something I was not expecting to see in this show, especially at this point of it.
Yeah.
So
it was definitely a surprise for me too.
I will ask you, Logan, like, what did you think of Hephaestus?
I liked the actor. He brought off more of a tinkerer vibe than
Mhm.
a forge or a blacksmith vibe. So I was kind of a little iffy about that, but I liked it at the same time. I kind of wish, and hear me out first, it's not some
Okay.
weird fetish thing. I wish we had seen his feet because in the mythology, his feet are backwards. I don't remember if he had a cane or not, but normally he had something to help him walk around.
All right. Well,
So I kind of
Logan,
want to see if they
Logan,
take
you've
what the
just
detail.
you've just exposed yourself as a foot guy. And
I just said
so
it
there's that.
wasn't. Oh, no.
Everybody in the comments put down Logan has a foot fetish.
Please don't.
Um, yeah, I get it. That'd be interesting. I don't know if I would really care that much, but you being a nerd, it's fine. I guess.
Say, just being a mythology nerd, I wanted to see that. I just figured it would have been kind of funny to see.
Could you imagine? You just no. This is the way they should have done the scene, right? You have Annabeth
Uh-huh.
tinkering, and it slowly pans, and you see like Hephaestus's feet first, and it just like slowly the camera pans up to his face.
That would have been a good way to do it. Could you think he'd be walking up backwards? But no, he's facing you.
That would be funny. But yeah, I think they did a good job again on casting Hephaestus. Again, Hephaestus is a weird one because I think depending on like what mythology, depending on what interpretation of the character, you can either have it the way they did it, which is like a tinkerer type, like, you know, that, or you have him more like a blacksmith type of guy. Like if you even think about, oh, I forget his name. He's the camp head of House of Festus, or not house, of cabin. What am I looking for, Logan? What's like the official wording for the god cabins or whatever?
They just normally call them cabins. I don't remember which one.
Okay,
Hephaestus
well, the leader of Hephaestus's cabin is kind of described in the book as more like I'm forgetting his name, so sorry, book readers. But he's described as more of like a bigger dude. So like that's kind of like the other interpretation is like you have that like bigger like blacksmith dude, and because you're, you know, doing so much blacksmithing, you're gonna get muscles and stuff.
Yep.
So yeah, I didn't mind this interpretation at all. I thought it was a pretty solid one. One thing I did like, right, is how this almost felt like a test. Like it was almost like Hephaestus was testing them. That he never really like planned to actually like keep one of them. That's the vibe I got. I don't know if that's the vibe you got, but it just seems like the way everything plays out. And Annabeth basically going, yeah, he's not like the rest of us. He's not, you know, this dude that's all about power and wealth and whatever else you want to like throw in there. And that's kind of what allows Hephaestus to let Percy go.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of saw that almost as a test. I don't know how you interpreted that scene, but that's how I did.
I did see it that way as well because Hephaestus, you know, like I said, everyone made fun of him. Nobody liked him.
Yeah.
Even his own wife, which, you know, it was kind of a forced relation. But yeah, no one liked him because he wasn't the guy who was there for the power and the fame.
Yep.
Or whatever you want to call it for the gods. And so to have Annabeth be like, no, he's not like that. I mean, he clearly sacrificed himself for the greater good, unlike what a god would do.
Yeah.
And so I just liked it because then he was like, okay, you know what? Fair enough. If he was some, I don't even know, some Clarice,
Yeah.
he probably would have left her.
Yeah, he probably would have.
But it was nice to see that. I did like how they did that.
Another layer that I really liked is that Hephaestus even tempts like Annabeth with what we were just saying, like offering her, oh, you know, if you leave right now, like you'll get all of this power and influence, right? Your mother will be proud of you because you got Ares's shield back. And so it's
And
interesting that Annabeth is just like, yeah, don't care. That's, I think, another thing that like really featured into Hephaestus being like, yeah, okay, they passed the test.
mm-hmm.
So again, all of that was great. I do want to point out, I mean, because I think for me personally, I've been very critical of the character of Annabeth in the show. I think this is by far, when it comes to what they gave the character of Annabeth to do, the best when it came to facial acting, her acting in general. So I wanted to give a shout out there. I also thought that like the music was really good at this final end part of the episode. And again, I think a great emotional scene. I enjoyed a lot of what we saw here. So at this point, they end up going back to the diner to meet Ares. And this is an interesting scene because it's like, okay, this is more a little bit closer to what the books are when it comes to like Percy and Ares' last interaction before they leave the diner. And so I really love that one thing they did quite well is I think building up the tensions between those two characters, between Percy and Ares. I can't remember, Logan, remind me if I'm wrong on this, but they didn't really do the thing where in the book, it's like Ares basically curses Percy. And it's like in the next fight, you know, don't pray to him, basically. Is that in the show? I don't remember it being in the show.
He didn't say. He said something along those lines. Shoot, now you got me. I can't remember it.
It's so hard when you read the book and the show at the same time because you mix things.
Yeah, and then I listened to it. Sadly, I didn't read it over almost a week ago now, so I don't remember it. What did he say though? I can't remember, but it was right there around those lines.
Okay.
Like, next time you're in a battle, don't come to me for help.
Yeah, okay. That's what it is in the book as well. So, yeah, so that's really good foreshadowing to events to come. And we see that Ares gives the crew some supplies that they're going to need on their little journey. Pay close attention to that. And they're going to basically the Lotus Hotel, which I know Nickerson is very excited about.
Yes, I am.
The Lotus Hotel is very important for a lot of different plot lines going forward.
Yes,
so
it's very important. And then they added a little extra by saying that Hermie was there. And he,
yes,
I don't know if he played there or owned. I don't think he owns it, but they say he goes.
They said something about Hermes, about him basically going to gamble, which should be cool if we meet Hermes. That'd be cool. But basically the episode ends on they get into this back of this truck, and the episode ends on a very big cliffhanger. Grover tells them that he knows who stole the Master Bolt. Interesting place to end this episode off.
Very interesting, yes.
Because it leaves me with a lot of questions, like where are they going with this? Because this whole plot line with Grover did not happen in the book. So
that was completely different.
How is that going to tie into the overarching story? And like me and Logan knowing what the end point of this book is going to be is interesting to say the least. So that kind of gets us to the end of the episode. So I want to give our final scores. Logan, what would you give this episode out of 10?
I definitely have to go back down to 7 just for some of the parts. I am intrigued to see how they're going to do with the cliffhanger because, like you said, that's new. It's the first time that they've done something different from the book that I'm actually looking forward to see how they change it. I'm hoping it's good, but I won't get my hopes up too high.
I think, see, I'm going to go with I know people don't like when you do the point system, but like, I'm going to go like a 7.5. I'm like in between 7 and an 8 because there's some things I really like that they did in this episode. And there's not anything where I'm like, man, this is really bad, but there's things that I think could be really bad. It just depends how the show does them. How does it execute certain plot points that they've built on right now? So I'm going to sit at a 7.5. You know, that's very subject to go down or up. But yeah, I'm excited to go into the Lotus Hotel. I think it's by far one of the most anticipated episodes for me personally.
I'm right there with you. I'm ready.
Honestly,
to see how they do it.
I'm anticipating all the next 3 episodes. All the next 3 episodes should be really good, right?
When the fun begins, yes.
We've kind of been in a nice little prelude to everything coming, and it's about to blow up. So
Yes, it is.
we'll see how it goes. Thank you guys all for joining us for another episode. This will be up Friday, and then Monday, like usual, will be my everything I did and didn't like from the episode. So if you want more of a summarized thing, even though this is 50 minutes, so if you're here, I don't know why you would watch that, because you watched the entire video, but
congrats if you do, by the way. I mean,
yeah, put it down in the comments about if you enjoy Logan's foot fetish, if you're a fan as well.
God.
But
my God, did you like that?
You know, I have to. All right, so thank you guys for watching. We'll see you in the next one.